benefits of whole brain thinking are extensive. The lateral split of our brain into hemispheres, combined with brain dominance, polarizes us and creates conflict. Whole brain thinking returns us to mental wholeness and promotes peace. Whole brain thinking minimizes the negative effects of polarization. It helps us better understand ourselves, our friends, and our families, and improves personal and professional relationships. Whole brain thinking enhances problem solving and creativity. When we use the whole of our brain to think, we optimize our ability to learn and thus facilitate positive changes in behavior, promote self-honesty, and calm the mind. And of course, these benefits all help us feel better. Because of a string of scientific advances in our understanding of the brain, we now know a great deal about how it operates. But these academic and medical findings remain largely fragmented. To make the best use of this information, it needs to be viewed holistically. Recognizing this, I set out to assemble the best of brain science research and organize it for people who are too busy to do it themselves. To manage any task successfully, it helps to understand what we are working with. The first thing to know about the brain's effect on our thinking is this. The two hemispheres use completely different systems to gather and process the information that gives rise to our thoughts. One hemisphere uses a dual system. The other uses a non-dual system. A dual system gives us a local viewpoint that shows us the details. A non-dual system gives us a global viewpoint that shows us the big picture. Typically, the left hemisphere is operated by a dual operating system, and the right hemisphere is operated by a non-dual operating system. I'll discuss dual and non-dual operating systems in more detail in the second part of this video. Another thing we need to know about the information management systems that operate the hemispheres, feed consciousness, and shape our thinking is that they are a team of specialists. They do different things. In fact, they complement one another. What one does, the other does not do. Since they have distinctly different management styles, values, and problem-solving methods, they often generate conflict. Yet, because the systems complement one another, we know that they are capable of harmony. Now, you might have heard that the two sides of the brain are highly redundant and wonder, doesn't that mean they do the same thing? And yes, they are highly redundant. But we are discussing the systems that operate the redundancy. A third thing to know about the brain's influence on our thinking is this. In a majority of us, the forces of genetic dominance cause one hemisphere and its operating system to be dominant and the other to be recessive. In other words, the two systems are unequal in their contribution to consciousness and unequal in their effect on our thinking. Our dominant hemisphere dominates the flow of information to consciousness. Our non-dominant hemisphere, in effect, serves the dominant. If we inherit this type of genetic dominance, we are either left brain dominant or right brain dominant. In some people, genetic dominance integrates the hemispheres. These people inherit the ability to think with the whole of their brain. I explained the genetics of this in my video, The Brain's 4 Operating Systems. Those of us who have not inherited this ability and wish to develop it need to be mindful of how dominance can affect the way we think. When one hemisphere dominates the other, it sets us up to be highly familiar with our dominant system of thought and relatively unfamiliar with our recessive system. Since the two operating systems have different viewpoints, support different values, and generate different solutions, it's no wonder that so many of our cultures are so polarized. Our cultures are polarized because most people are polarized. Our locally oriented viewpoint views things as being separate from one another. This makes us competitive. Our locally oriented viewpoint focuses on goals that protect and serve the self. This makes us conservative. In contrast, our globally oriented viewpoint shows us how things connect, which leads us to want to be cooperative and serve others. Global consciousness promotes liberal actions. Because our two hemispheres see and respond so differently, if one is recessive, we can harbor a mini version of cultural polarization in our head. To be polarized is to risk that we will misunderstand or fail to appreciate the thoughts and ideas produced by our recessive operating system. So, how do we escape the negative effects of polarization on our thinking? We heal the divide. We learn to perceive the two systems as cooperative rather than competitive. In order to better understand the systems that operate the hemispheres, some of the questions that we might ask include, what are the specialties, strengths, and limitations of each system? What are their viewpoints and values? And how do they stereotypically respond when helping us understand issues and solve problems? We won't answer all of these questions here. I do this in my book, How Whole Brain Thinking Can Save the Future, and to a limited extent in other videos. But perhaps these questions give you a sense of how we might develop a character profile of the two hemispheres. Then, using this profile as a guide, bring their operation into greater harmony, and thus come to think more holistically. We achieve holistic thinking by ensuring that both hemispheres fully contribute. The contributions of our dominant hemisphere come to mind automatically. The contributions of our recessive hemisphere come to mind when we access its viewpoint. Perspective and perception and the thoughts that grow out of them are a product of our viewpoint. Our recessive viewpoint can be difficult to identify. It's largely hidden. But we know that it is the complement of our dominant viewpoint. So once we determine which system in its viewpoint is dominant, we then know which viewpoint is recessive. How do we determine which viewpoint is dominant? Free brain dominance tests, such as those found on the internet, are generally too simple to accurately map the brain's complexity. As a result, they can be misleading. The best solution to this problem is probably self-observation. Let's summarize. For most of us, as a result of our genetics, one hemisphere will dominate the flow of information to consciousness. The other will be recessive. But having a recessive hemisphere need not limit us. The viewpoints and values of our recessive hemisphere may still find their way to mind through cultural influences. Plus, we can consciously consult our recessive hemisphere. Nevertheless, if a hemisphere is dominant, its viewpoint and values will tend to dominate the mental environment where our thoughts and behaviors are formed. Good managers want to know what role their genetics play in shaping this process. Mind is the one aspect of life over which we have almost complete control. Through the power of mind, we have the ability to supplement our inherited viewpoint. We supplement it by consulting our recessive viewpoint. It's that easy. To make whole brain thinking an effortless process, we need to do one more thing. We need to value the brain's dual and non-dual viewpoints equally. Once we value the two viewpoints equally, we are likely to consult them equally. To get a better sense of why our thinking has become so polarized, in part 2 of this video, we look at how the brain's dual and non-dual operating systems differ.